Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Thayer Long. I'd like to welcome you all to the program today. It's our second program that we've done in many weeks on this very important issue of vote by mail, and specifically, we're going to be talking today on best practices on ballot and envelope design. So, um, Julie, let's go ahead and advance here. So as you can see, our topic today is best practices for ballot mail and envelope design. Again, the impetus for this program is we're seeing a tremendous need and demand for ballot mail. Actually, a number of states recently have made the news with regards to what their plans are for ballot mail. Yesterday, the state of Texas, in fact, a judge ruled that the state of Texas could go and increase their ballot mail drive. And also, I know there's some news that Michigan made today around vote by mail. So this is obviously a very hot issue, not just for our industry, but I think even more importantly, the election system here that we have in our country and in our democratic process. So again, a very important topic today, which is going to be around ballot mail and envelope design. We've got a great program lined up for you today. Our primary, or I guess our keynote speaker today is Whitney Quisenberry. She's the director for the Center for Civic Design, which is a nonprofit organization which is dedicated to using their expertise in civic design to help improve the voter experience, making elections easier and making it better and more accessible for people to have a good voter experience. So she brings a wealth of information around this specific issue. We're also going to hear from Rick Becerra from Blue Crest and Brooke Spalding from W&D as we wrap up, where they can provide their perspective from a technology standpoint on ballot and envelope design. So without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Whitney, who is going to take us through best practices. So Whitney, if you want to go ahead and grab control and take us away.
I'm waiting to see if this is going to work. You all should now be seeing a lovely slideshow, or hopefully a lovely slideshow.
Perfect. We can see it perfectly.
Great. Okay. We already said hello there here, but I just want to call attention to the URL here on our website. It's linked from the homepage. We have a toolkit of information and templates and examples of everything I'm going to be talking about today. So easy peasy to find it all. We started the Center for Civic Design 7 years ago, but I actually got involved in elections back in 2000 when we had this election in Florida that we all might remember. And one of the things that we've realized is that in order to improve the experience for voters, we actually have to help election officials improve their design skills and how they work, and that because they're the moderator through which the voters get everything. But we've also learned that the election officials themselves are constrained. They're constrained by laws, as we were just talking about, but also by the systems they have to work with. So that's really why we're here today, is to make sure that we can get all of these things aligned so that we provide a better experience. Now, back in February, when we started doing this year's round of presentations, or January, I guess, we had a lovely little section at the beginning about how vote by mail was on the rise, and people are voting in person less on election day, and they're voting early and by mail more. And you've probably all seen this slide from Amber McReynolds' organization, the National Vote at Home Institute, tracking the spread of vote by mail. Obviously, with 2020, this is all catching up with us, but these are the laws as of the beginning of the year. And what you can see is that in the West, people are much more likely to be already voting by mail and comfortable with voting by mail. But as you move east, we here on the East Coast are catching up a lot. And so Virginia, for instance, is bravely marked in blue as having a no excuse required, but that's new. That just happened this year. So this is their first elections with it. Pennsylvania, it just happened this year. So we're still teaching the Eastern Seaboard how to use vote by mail. But we don't need to talk about that because this year, voting by mail is what's going to get us to the 2020 elections. We don't know. I mean, there's still a lot of primaries left to go this summer. We don't know what's going to happen in the fall. And the one way we know of to make sure that everybody who's a registered eligible voter can get their ballot and be able to vote is by putting it in their hands. And I think that also serves as a bunch of voter education as well, because what better way to know what you're going to be voting on and how to vote and where to return your ballot and how to cast your ballot than to actually have it delivered to your mailbox. The challenge that we had was how do we make sure that that package that gets delivered to your mailbox survived what the election director in San Diego called the 10-minute trip, the 10-second trip, sorry, from the mailbox to the kitchen table without bypassing the trash can, right? So we don't want it to look like junk mail. And in fact, we started this project a few years ago in California when they switched to what's called the Voters' Choice Act, which is allowing the counties to, one at a time, as they're ready, come on board with all mail voting, plus vote centers for those who need to vote in person, and plus early voting. They wanted to be able to do more voter education about how this was new, to be able to show off the ballots, to help people recognize that that thing that arrived in the mail was their ballot. And also they had to update it to the new laws. So we worked with California to create a template for them that's being slowly adopted. And after that, we thought, this is a pretty good national template. We went to the US Postal Forum, National Postal Forum, and there was some excitement about it there. And so we've been working on this idea that what if ballot envelopes had a kind of national brand? Now, when we say brand, and we're talking about election materials, we are not talking flashy graphics, because we think that official material brand is that it's calm, it's accurate, it's uncluttered, it's easy to read. But what if a ballot envelope was instantly recognizable, if it helped voters know what to do to return things badly, if it was already designed with the USPS regulations in mind and with the optimization in mind, if it was flexible because there are different ballot envelope systems. It has to be bilingual because there are dozens of states that have that requirement, and the option to either hide or expose the signature depending on the culture in the state. So all of these things, it's a lot of requirements to bake into a couple little envelope designs. We think we got it, and we'll see what you think. I think we basically just said this, which is that it has to meet all of these requirements and balance it. When in doubt, we always want to err in the favor of the voter, but what's in favor of the voter in a ballot envelope is getting the ballot in their hand in a timely manner and getting it back. I don't know how many ballots will actually be used in the election, but it's going up. I mean, every time a state shifts from we're going to not mail anything to we're going to mail a request form to we're just going to mail ballots, we add another 5, 6, 7, 8, 15 million to the list. So without more ado, I want to just dive into the design solutions that we've come up with. As you can see, it's a pretty clean, simple design. And what we're going to do for the next 20 minutes or so is just unpack that design and what we've tried to bake into it. The first is, of course, there's an outgoing envelope. And one of the things that we realized was that the back surface of the outgoing envelope has no other purpose, and it's normally blank. But there is absolutely no reason why that back surface can't be used to provide contact information, to tell people how to return their ballot, to put the county clerk's photograph on it if they absolutely want to remind them to vote early. And as you can see, we designed these ballots bilingual from the beginning. We did that because if it fits in 2 languages, it fits in 1 language, right? And maybe the text can get a little bigger. But basically, we wanted to make sure that it would work in 2 languages. So it's a pretty basic outgoing envelope. We designed it with a windowed envelope, assuming that the voter's address and IMB are showing through the window. We'll talk about the colors in a minute. It's got all the exclusion zones and space that the postal requires, and return service, and it's got the all-important official election mail logo. Years ago, and we have continued this over the years, we do a lot of research with voters about the materials that are arriving at their home, and from voter guides to ballots to campaign materials. And we asked them, how do you know this is an official thing? And they said, it's got the swoopy thing on it, meaning the election mail logo. And they said, they usually have that seal. Now, they don't really read the seal, but that presence of that seal helps remind people that this is something official. And every election office has one. If they don't have one, they use the counties. If they don't, and counties all have them. So that's something that taken together, this little section of the page here, of the envelope, gives us a kind of signifier that everybody can recognize that this is your vote by mail official ballot, that it's coming from the county, that it is election mail. The place where things get fun, of course, is on the return envelope, because we want to remind people when they have to get it back, right? It has to be dropped off by 7 p.m. on election day, or whatever that is. Is it postmarked by election day, or does it have to be returned by election day? And that's just the front. And on the back, this is the place that is the most highly variable, because every state has a law, and those laws tell you what has to be on the ballot, what the oath is. We thought this was a pretty long oath until we started working with some of the other states and realized that actually this is a pretty compact and efficient ballot. I'm going to be showing you a lot of things, both in this 6:9 aspect ratio and also in something that's a number 9, 10, 11 envelope ratio, because we're flexible for that. But let's talk about the colors first. Those colors have meaning, right? All outgoing envelopes are blue. Most return envelopes are purple. But we then allowed a whole collection of, oops, sorry, that's not what I meant to do, allowed for alternate colors. And there was a bunch of reasons why we did that. The first is that neighboring counties that share a mail sorting facility, it lets everybody see really instantly which ones go to County A and which ones go to County B. The second reason is that, especially in states that have a lot of special jurisdictions like fire districts, you can often have overlapping special elections. And so the election office can pick 2 different colors, and then they know that the teal one is for the special and the purple one is for the primary. And a little bit of branding. I have to admit that we gave Orange County a bit of a pass on making their envelopes orange, because it's the name of their county, but they're counties that like different colors, and we didn't see any particular reason not to do it. Down at the bottom are the 2 browns, and those are for overseas voters. Again, those are special envelopes. They look different. They often get handled differently, and we wanted to make sure that that those were easy to identify. And then the last 2 are the pink, and there's actually a red one, and the yellow one. Those are for special envelopes that don't go through the mail, provisional envelopes, same-day registration envelopes, replacement ballot envelopes. So reasons why someone comes in either to the office or to a polling place and their ballot has to go into an envelope to be opened later. But that means that every ballot, whether it's going to the voter or has just been returned from the voter and is ready to be counted, is in an envelope that looks pretty much the same, barring postal and things like that. And the color code tells you what kind of ballot it is, so you can help. And you can see the array of actual envelopes that were created a few years ago by El Dorado County. Did all that work themselves, by the way, and were one of the first ones to kind of adopt the whole system. The reason why, the other thing the color bar does, it's nice, is it wraps around the edge of the envelope. And as you can see in that middle tray, an envelope with a different color on it stands out. Even a fairly thin envelope just stands right out, and it's easy to find, which means that in a ballot sorting facility, if you get a handful of ballots that are the wrong color, they can be found and moved over to where they're supposed to be going. So it lets you right through the entire mail stream help make sure that the right ballot is going to the right place. I've been showing you a 2 envelope solution, but there are states, many of them on the East Coast, that use a 3 envelope solution. So there's an outgoing ballot, outgoing envelope, that's just the same. The middle one is the return envelope, that's the outside, but it doesn't have the oath on it. It might have some instructions about when to and how to return. The inner envelope is the secrecy envelope. And that's where the oath is, so that they can open the envelope and then check the voter in, make sure that they are eligible, that they haven't voted before, that their signature matches, and only then do they open the inner envelope. One of the objections to to having just two envelopes is that the voter's signature is on the outside of the envelope, unless it's an envelope system that's got a big flap to cover it up. The big flaps are dicey because you have to open that flap to see the signature without opening the ballot container at the same time. So that's an issue. But nonetheless, it will adapt, and it's just the same information moved around. This is a 9, 10, 11 sequence of envelopes that we're designing for Virginia right now. The other thing that the envelopes have to be is really flexible for state requirements. The pictures all the way on the left are some Florida envelopes from last year. You will see, by the way, that there's a lot of green in some of these illustrations. We originally had green as the return envelope. Postal asked us to change it this year because it was too close to the certified mail, and we were having envelopes were getting pulled for being certified mail, and it was delaying the ballot getting back to the election office. This was part of an incredible 3-meeting review process that we went through that included the head of the mail design analyst, automation, processing, just all of the departments, all looking at very carefully and weighing in on the basic template. But those are from Florida. And one of the interesting things on the back is you can see that the text crosses the flap. That's because Florida law says that the voter has to sign across the flap to show that it was sealed when they signed it. The forms are in different things. The second one is the Virginia form. This is an awfully long form with a huge oath that they have to sign. And then there might be a shorter thing, and on the back of the envelope, there's different requirements that you might have to list. This is, by the way, whoever just asked this question, these are not ballot designs. These are the envelope systems. They're completely separate. The envelope just goes in that box, and it's whatever that the election office is using. And they'll all fit in an envelope because that's sort of the definition of vote by mail. So the next question, I'm just going to answer this live. In your view, can there be a single envelope concept used for all states, meaning size, colors, and number of envelopes? Depends which time zone we're talking about. I think in the immediate, there's no reason why we couldn't all be using the same basic size and design. But some of the things like how many envelopes are required might be written into law, which means that a law has to change to be able to change the number of envelopes. In Virginia, in fact, it tells you what has to be on the flap versus what has to be on the flat of the envelope. Some of those laws are very, very specific. And in all of that text, for instance, is in quotes, which means that it has to be listed absolutely exactly. And we know that different printers, different processors have envelope standards. The one on the right is one that, just a sketch of one that where the signature is hidden. There's a bunch of different ways of people who've been doing mail ballot envelopes for a long time have, there's some where there's a peekaboo little window that you can open up. There's one where you can do a double slit. So you slit once to expose the signature and then once again to open the envelope. So the trick here is that we started with what are the things that will have the biggest impact for voters on success. And there were three things that we found. One is that it be recognizable, that even with the variations that happened from different states designing in different ways, that it's always recognizable. And this seems like a good chance to answer the question about the swoosh values on the front of the envelope. There's actually only 3 that are allowed by postal. There's a red, a blue, and a black. I know some people do gray, which seems to also be allowed. We actually recommend simply using the black, not using the extra colors. There's no particular reason for it. And it's actually easiest to read in the black. Back to voters. So the first is that checklist helps ballots get counted. we actually have seen envelopes that people have scanned for us from election office, and where people have actually checked off the things on the checklist to show that they've actually used those checklists to remind them of what they need to do. So just that simple thing makes a big difference. The other is the signature, right? So making sure that the signature form is easy for voters to sign. The single biggest recommendation we make is this little block. Not voter signature or signature here, but voter sign here in ink if we want to say that. Some states want to put power of attorney, is not acceptable. That there is a square and an X. This is really important. The X tells them where to point. The voter signature is the only one with an X, and the box helps them bound that signature so that it's more likely that an automated signature recognition system will see the entire signature and can match that up to the signature on file. I'll talk about the rest of it in a minute, but I want to call your attention to the two round circles around the signature. Those are holes. In some states, they include a hole on the ballot envelope so that they can put a tie wrap through it when they've taken the ballots out, and they can prove to themselves that no ballot has been left behind inside an envelope. Oregon actually pioneered these double holes. One hole goes all the way through, and it's used for storing the used envelopes. The other one marks the end of the signature area, and it only goes through one half of the envelope, not both sides of it. That becomes a signature guide for someone who's blind or low vision, so they can find where to sign, increasing their independence and their ability to vote at ballot independently, especially if their state is one that has they have special electronic marking systems that allow someone to mark their ballot on their computer and print it out if they can't see the printed ballot. Philip Shatner is asking about BRA and CRA return. Yes, the ballot, some states pay that postage for all voters. That's a growing number of them. And some states don't require voters to put postage on it. The policy of U.S. Postal Service is that they will always deliver that ballot, and they will charge the election department the postage because no one wants to hear that ballots didn't get through because someone put 72 cents on instead of 75 cents or forgot to put a stamp on it entirely. One of the reasons why states have been willing to shift to using postage paid is that in the West, in Colorado, they estimate that well over 70% of the ballots are returned to the a drop box or to a polling site rather than being returned through mail. So the state isn't actually paying, or the county isn't actually paying the full cost of all of that postage. I'm afraid I don't have any information available on Canada's system. It's reasonably similar, but the laws are different and the elections are different. So we've sort of moved into designing it for processing. And this includes getting those envelopes out the door, getting them through postal, and then getting them back to be processed at the election office. The first thing is that all the personalized information is printed on one side of the envelope. So that the stuff that's in the single face type, the other typeface is all overprinted. This is for systems where the ballots are pre-printed, assembled, stuffed, and then the overprinting goes on as it goes through the processing pass. So it's all in one line and makes it easy to do that. Because the address goes through a window, you can see what happens is that. So it's in the same space. And so that return address is just sitting where it is on the back of the envelope, ready to be seen through the window. Now, in Michigan, there are a lot of townships in Michigan where people sat around a table and put stickers on the front of the envelope. Works just fine. They don't have a windowed envelope, but the reason why we want everything to be one pass is because we want to not have to worry about matching up the address on the outgoing envelope with the address on the return envelope and the voter information. There's things like this little QR code. That QR code is for the voter registration system. So they can scan that ballot, scan that code, pull up the voter's record, and it's right there. We've done that. Let's talk about intelligent mail barcodes. There are 3 of them on these envelopes. This is postal suggestion. The first one is over the voter's name, and it's the voter's delivery address, shows through the window or is printed on the label. It's personalized for the voter. It's personalized to the voter, so you can actually track it. And it's got the correct STID, the service type ID. There's now a whole set of service type IDs just for election mail, and use them because they help. It's also one of the ways that Postal can prove that they had that envelope in the system, even if it does not have a postmark on it. Number 2 is the one for the election department that's on the front of the envelope. And then Postal Advice put in the third one on. It's down in the lower right corner of the back of the envelope. It does not show through the window if it's a windowed envelope. But what it does is that if somehow the envelope ends up upside down or backwards in the automation stream, or the FIM is obscured and it doesn't know which the front is, the first address it finds on either side of the envelope, reading from the lower right and moving up from there, will be the STID that gets it to the election office. Will be the IMB that gets it to the election office. And then the other thing is that the return address for this envelope can also be the election office. In this case, it does not have to be your mail, the mail. I'm sorry, I forgot the word for it. The permit address. It can just be, but it can be the same address as the one to which the envelope is addressed, because that's where that envelope is meant to go wherever it goes. So on the outgoing envelope, it has to match your permit. On the return envelope, it can be the facility to which it's being returned. One other bit of design detail is you'll notice that there's about a 1/2 inch of space, 5/8 of an inch space actually above the seal. That is so that there's clear space for the return address, for the automation to find their return address in the upper left corner of the addressing area. It is legal to put it there rather than being in the upper left corner of the envelope itself. But because those seals have words, the OCR system tries to read that seal. If it sees words, it tries to read it as a return address. So that little blank space up at the top helps with that. And the other thing that the colors do is it helps the counties. This is a photograph from Contra Costa in California. They got envelopes from over half of the California's counties. And in California, as in many states now, there's a law that allows them to, actually requires them to mail those ballots to the correct county. The big tall pile right in the middle of the picture with the orange and the circle on it is Alameda, their neighboring county, which means that people came into a polling place or went to a drop box and they just tossed the ballot in, and it went to the wrong county. These typically did not go through the mail stream. They came in through a drop box. We actually include in the system a printable label that they can put on the envelope or package they're using to send them over to the right county. So once again, even a package with ballots being shipped from one election office to another have the same look and the same thing that allows all of the printing to happen on one side also means that everything you need to process that ballot for the election workers is on the same side. We put the word Franklin, we put the name of the county on here and the name of the election because one of the election officials said it takes, if you have to pick up the envelope, pull it out of the stream, flip it over, takes a little bit of time. This way people see right away if it's the wrong county, if it's an overlapping election, they see that immediately. The signature is right there, the witness signature is right there, and the name and address of the voter is there, either pre-printed or handwritten. So this is sort of the end of what I had to show. I just want to say that, I love this poster. It's actually a flyer that was designed in Michigan. They made one. They used their own envelopes in the picture and took it and advised all of their jurisdictions to go to their postmaster in their town and drop that off for them, because the little mantra that blue envelopes are for delivery to the voters, purple envelopes return ballots to the election office is just absolutely key in making sure that a mail carrier holding an envelope in their hand knows what to do with it. So when we all work together, we can make elections better. I'm going to leave this up while we answer questions or move on to the next people. Tons of URLs. Yes, we will be sharing this at the end. Andrew, I'm not going to be able to answer the question about printing methods for ballots and what is acceptable. And again, I want to make sure that we're talking about ballots here and not envelopes, which are different. There are states, California, for instance, has standards for paper. They certify paper manufacturers and they certify printers to make sure that they are following all their laws. But those are very much state by state, and they are voting system by voting system. So what a voting system needs. The thing that I do know is that there are retention requirements for ballots, specifically ballots, but sometimes also the envelopes. The longest, I think, is 24 months. So the ink on that ballot has to survive for 2 years. Sean asked about what percentage of returns are peel and seal. Very few of them. This has only come up this year because of COVID. In general, what we hear is that nobody likes the peel and seal because they jam the systems. And I'm working on a project with some public health officials about safe voting, and they say it's a little silly, but if it makes people feel better, it might be worth doing this year. That is all I have.
Hey, Whitney, this is Thayer. I got just a question for you. On your resources links, is there a place that shows all the various state requirements on envelope design?
No, there isn't. And I wouldn't, you should not accept that information from anybody but the election offices you're working with. There are two things about that. One is state, and some of the state requirements are laid out easily and easy to find, but the counties will know what they are. The other is, what does the county, if you're working at the county level, what's the county practices? Because one thing that we are hearing from election officials this year is that even if they're scaling up vote by mail, if they are a small enough jurisdiction to manage it, they may simply keep their somewhat mechanical processes or manual processes in place because they feel it will be easier to scale up the number of people they have. And there are some groups that have done some really nice calculators for them on envelopes per minute and how many people they would need to scale up. But because changing their processes is also hard. Elections, typically a change cycle for elections is usually a year or more. So doing this in 3 months, really less than that, because envelope orders, well, many of those orders were placed 9 months ago, but those presses have to start printing in about July to be ready to mail envelopes at the beginning of September, because that's when your UOCAVA ballots go out. Sorry, UOCAVA is the Uniform and Overseas voters. There are special laws that cover when and how they get to vote, and their mail ballots have to be in the mail stream 45 days before the election. So sometimes they will do a short run just for the UOCAVA with the overseas insignia, the brown envelopes, and then they'll follow with all the rest of them and send those out a couple of weeks later to their domestic voters. Yes, Sarah, we will have a copy of the PowerPoint for everybody.
Great, thank you, Whitney. And please, everybody, it sounds like you didn't need a reminder to utilize the Q&A section. I think we're all hopefully well equipped with our Zoom technology now. So keep asking questions. We'll be answering them either in real time or we'll be getting back to you shortly. Just a reminder, we are recording this program, and it will be available to share. And as we sort of transfer over to our next speaker, who's going to be Rick Becerra from Blue Crest, who will be talking a little bit on the technology side of this issue, as well as Brooke Spalding then with W&D. I'd also remind you that you're all going to be getting a very short assessment of this program right after we conclude. There is going to be an area where if you're going to want more information about vote by mail, if this is an area that you're looking to actively get into this year, we are going to want to capture that information and share that information as we move forward. So please be sure to relay that very important information to us at the conclusion of the program.
There, can I say one more thing, which is that the layouts are all in InDesign. So you can just pick them up and use them. All the material is free. It's available. This was all nonprofit funded work. So it's all available. We're available to answer questions. The one thing that I assume you all know this, but don't take a PDF and stretch it to fit your envelopes. Right? It'll mess up all the spacing for postal.
Great. Thanks, Whitney. Great. All right. Rick, please go ahead. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Claire. You guys can hear me okay?
We sure can.
All right, thank you. So thank you, Thoyer, and the AP Tech team. Whitney, fantastic presentation, by the way. Really appreciate that. I just wanted to touch a quick 5 minutes or so in terms of Bluecrest. So we're formally part of Pitney Bowes, a standalone global corporation with over 100 years experience in the digital print and mail industry. And we have low to high volume technology solutions, right? So we're headquartered out of Connecticut with a portfolio of American-made products, over 1,400 employees, 900 certified technicians to service within this vote by mail space. We serve the commercial, private, postal, government authorities around the globe. But you know, all in all, Bluecrest has been providing these vote by mail solutions to mail service providers, election services, state and county election officials for over 16 years now. It's pretty extensive experience. And Bluecrest has over 100 systems and operations serving vote by mail applications. You know, it's just to name some of the counties that we're involved with. And, you know, Whitney's talked about Orange County earlier. We're engaged with Orange County. We provided end-to-end solutions, and we'll talk about what end-to-end solutions means and then touch a little bit on ballot as well, right? So we're in King County, Miami-Dade, Pinellas, Jefferson, as well as several election service providers and mail service providers as well that support the vote by mail space. In terms of ballot design, I did want to touch on a few things because I think Whitney hit a home run with her communication and her presentation. We've come to know that not all counties are the same. We have daily conversations with state and county election officials. The jurisdictions have rules and must-haves, right? And whether it's the number of inserts for the ballot assembly or the amount of signature locations on the return ballots and or secrecy, there are a variety of different rules that need to be applied. So equally as important is understanding specifically with the counties, right? The question that came up in terms of printing technology, in terms of inkjet and a variety of other different aspects, you got to remember the counties have certain set rules, grade levels regarding barcodes, resolution, weight of paper. And you got to keep in mind as well that one of the things that is really important is that one thing remains for sure is that you have resources such as CCD and USPS to support in this effort because USPS has certain compliance as well that you need to abide by, right? The fantastic thing about it is that, you know, the Center for Civic Design is collaborating with the United States Postal Service to make it more into a standardized type process. I think we're really on the right track for that, right? As we continue to work with a variety of different folks within vote by mail, equally important is, you know, just to talk about the technology for the outbound process, providing the printing technology, whether it's print to roll and cut sheet. We produce the ballots, custom sample ballot booklets. We're certified with election vendors. That's one of the things that Whitney brought up earlier. In 2019, just a quick stat here, in 2019, our printer customers generated over 12.4 billion pages, primarily in ultra high integrity applications. I mean, that's a key note there, right? And then when you start talking about the inserting aspect of it, we have ballot assembly inserters with the ability to handle multiple types of insert and instructions, inline printing. And you heard Whitney again, as part of her presentation, there's certain information that needs to get added, whether it's a application ID, whether it's IMB, whether it's you know, voter information. We're able to do it with the inserting technology and ensuring that we have the appropriate identification and is within the USB compliance, right? On top of that, we also have sorting technology, right? As part of the sorting technology, It's available for USPS mail induction, right? Making sure that it's being validated, you're accounting for the densities and supporting postal discounts for mail entry. This same technology is actually utilized for state and county election officials for inbound processing. So the technology that's available for you to be able to support the vote by mail applications, we have the end-to-end. On top of that, we utilize what's called Reliavote. Reliavote is our application software, which ties it all together. It provides the integrity, the security, the control, the tracking to make sure that everything is going through and through, and you have an audit trail for it, right? So Bluecrest has, been designing these end-to-end solutions based on the input that we've received from a variety of different customers. And as I mentioned, whether it's mail service providers, election services, state and county election officials, we continue to invest year over year. We've recently invested and incorporated NIST compliance. Homeland Security is communicating with state and election officials related to that. You want to have the utmost security. Not only are we 256-bit encryption, but again, we continue to invest. NIST are certain rules and regulations to be able to comply as we continue to move ahead, right? So critical to any election, like I mentioned, integrity, security, control, tracking all the way through the stream. And the public, like I mentioned, they may be concerned with the security, but our technology is the most secure in the market. And with that, I'll pause there and turn it over to my fellow panelists, to take over.
Great, thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Folks, just go ahead and submit questions on Q&A. Brooke, you got it?
I think I'm there. If I didn't officially share screen, is that something you can do, Julie? Or am I not there?
I'll get the other screen unshared and get you shared, Brooke.
That'd be perfect. And while that's happening, some might recognize my voice. I'm going faceless today to try to not have as many hiccups with broadcasting. And W&D, we were founded in 1913. I'm going to really be talking about envelope construction today. And Julie, let me know when the screen is shared, if you could.
Brooke, you need to go ahead and click share screen down on the bottom of your screen and then share your presentation. So it's
escape and retry. 2 seconds here. And
we see you.
All right, good to be seen. So we're changing that. Now I'll be seen. How's that?
And now you just need to go ahead and try and share your actual screen.
Yes. Did that work?
Not seeing you yet.
Boy, I have it as shared screen.
Well,
Again. 2 more seconds. You see me.
yep.
Screen is shared.
And then make sure on your second screen where you should see all your various windows pop up, you select the right, your presentation and then click share again.
Okay.
There you go.
I was missing. So I've eaten up 3 minutes of my 10 minutes, but to the good, learning technology. So as I mentioned before, W&D, founded in 1913, we live and breathe envelopes and everything about envelopes. If you look at I want this advanced. There we go. So W&D, roughly $100 million American owned. We're owned by Barry Waymiller, which sports roughly $3 billion in revenue and about 12,000 worldwide employees. And you'll see in the next slide, if I advance it correctly, that we've been a longtime manufacturer of envelope machines, inserting machines, as well as overprinting machines. So we know and love envelopes. In fact, we bought Hom Industries, which a lot of commercial printers, mailers are familiar with. They're those green overprinting machines back around 2017. And we've merged together with FL Smith, that was part of Barry Waymiller's PCMC, also around maybe 2017, 16, and we help represent Burr's wrappers. So one of my comments is, we can basically tell you that of the 1,000 envelope machines that are out in the world today, about a quarter of them were made since the year 2000. So a quarter of them have what we call modern servos, which means you have to have a little bit of an understanding when you're working with your envelope vendor that tolerances generally can be considered a fat plus or minus a 32nd of an inch. And you'll find that your envelope converter is a very good postal expert at the same time. So if your solution, as Whitney eloquently educated us, was, let's say, a number 9, a number 10, and a number 11, like the Russian dolls, or a 10, an 11, and a 12, those are very familiar names to the envelope converter. But the envelope converter and who you work with is also very good at specials. So if you were kind of working around a 6x9 booklet, maybe the oath envelope is a 5 3/4, 8 7/8. You know, the reply envelope is 5 7/8, 9 1/8. The reason I'm just showing the 6 1/8 by 9 1/2 is a very strong warning. And all inserters, we make inserters. In fact, we probably are 70 to 80% plus of the inserting market that handles vote by mail and absentee balloting on the West Coast moving eastward. But once you go above a 6 1/8 by 11 1/2, which is the max letter size, you become a flat. And if you become a flat, based on what your postage discount rates are, you could easily be paying another 10 cents to 15 cents each. So in envelope world, if your envelope is, I don't know, maybe 3 cents each, a 10-cent surcharge on postage is $100 a thousand versus $30 a thousand. So it's a significant disincentive to go larger. But if one is going that way, the envelope converter will be able to help you. And I think the other thing you want to keep in mind with envelope construction is communicate with your envelope vendor how many pieces are going in. And we heard today, well, you know, there could be an oath envelope, there could be a separate reply envelope, there could be 1 or 2 ballots, maybe there's a piece of additional literature. The ballots might be very heavy stock, you know, 80-pound text, could be even heavier, and they may not even be nested because they want to make sure things don't stick. So when you think of that and you slide it into an envelope, some inserters really want like a 1/2 inch total tolerance slop back and forth after insertion. Other maybe more modern inserters can live with a 1/4 inch slop side to side, but that shift is very important. And it's also important determining how and where, if a window is located, that if something shifts side to side, you still, I think the postal specs are an 1/8 inch clearance with the window, but you might want to consider a 1/4 inch with vote by mail criticality just to be safe. So a little quick reminder, paper is alive, so it gives up moisture and it takes on moisture, and you don't want to hang on to them for a long, long time. Let's leave it that way. So if you're ordering fewer than 250,000 at a time, you're likely getting them from someone with die cut capability. And generally that's a 2-color flexo, you know, and that can provide the nice wraps you were talking about, blue for outbound, burgundy for coming back. It can also provide a security tint if needed. And overprinting machines come into effect. They're not very good for bleeds, but they could add additional colors if helpful. And litho-convert is an extra step, but that's when you take a large parent sheet, maybe a 25 by 38, get 8 up, and that also helps you do bleeds and wraps. If it's more than 500,000, you know, modern webs are out there that can handle 3 or more colors. They can handle specials. They can move, you know, relatively quickly, but everything goes better the more time you have before you have to get them in for insertion. And remember, I think voters need to see everything at least 5 days before an election. So when you start working the clock backwards, there's no time like the present to get engaged with your source of envelopes. This next slide, I just have kind of 3 comments. I see 2 here. It doesn't hurt at all, as Whitney said, share with your envelope supplier, share the PDFs, share the samples, give them what is likely to go in, and they can be very creative. And they can add the holes you're seeking, right? In general, if you're trying to see through to make sure no one missed anything, the hole on the face is going to be larger than the one on the back. So it might be a 3/8 hole with a 1/4 inch hole. You get much smaller, you got spaghetti going everywhere and you're making confetti. Or maybe you have special perfs, or as you saw, that remittance flap to hide a signature. Your envelope converter can work with that. do be aware, and I appreciate the color insignia. Someone might be tempted to go out and buy burgundy. I'm just going to buy a burgundy color and make my envelope out of that. But you got to remember the black printing, that contrast ratio is very important to the post office. So I think it's very good in general that black print goes on top of a white envelope or white substrate. Some of these designs, you are actually inkjet printing through an open window onto the envelope inside, so it serves a dual purpose. And some of these envelopes, there might even be a vertical window that's going to help look like in our kind of systems to reassure that the ballot is correct. And then there's addressing on the other side, the flap side, to ensure that it's going to the right voter. So I don't have my watch, but I suspect I'm probably getting close. Obviously ready and eager to take some questions. And I'm not going to play this slide for my envelope buddies, but those who could not make it out to Drupa, when you get the power deck, it will transport you. Pretend you have all the right beer, and you'll see a modern machine running at 1,200 envelopes a minute. And it's so stable and quiet, you can drink the beer right next to it with social distancing practice. Thanks there.
Great, thanks, Brooke. I think we've got a couple of questions that are coming in, but Whitney, kind of want to go back to you because you've been fielding a lot of questions about vote by mail, ballot mail, at least recently, and kind of one of the first questions that was posed was, we're hearing various estimates, and as an industry, we're trying to determine, what capacity constraints, could exist depending upon, how many ballots now are going to be done through the mail versus in person. So, last week we were in a presentation where, we heard from Amber that, roughly, 50% of all ballots this year will go through the mail, which equated to about 100 million ballots. Are you hearing similar numbers or something different?
I mean, especially when you do it on an average. Look, if you're working in specific states, the number of registered voters in that state is an easy thing to look up and find on just Google elections or Google that question. And, Michigan has roughly 5 million registered voters. If they're going to mail, well, they're not mailing all, they're only mailing things. But let's say during the primary, they got up to about 45% of people voting by mail or having a ballot sent to them. That number is only going to go up. And so, Maryland is 4 million and they just mailed a ballot to everyone. So you know what the max is. You can figure you're going to get to about 40 to 50%, even in states that are starting from 6% or so. And by the way, can I give you one of my favorite numbers?
Sure.
Sorry, I forgot to say this. Michigan adopted our envelopes this year as part of their transformation with a new Prop 3. In 2018, the number of envelopes that came back without a signature, therefore either couldn't be counted or they had to chase the voter down, was 0.22%. In the primary election, it was 0.06%. That's about almost a 400% improvement.
That's great. That's great. Sean, it looks like you were typing a question, but it got cut off. Sean, if you want to retype that. And then Whitney, and another question would be, your ballot designs and templates, things like the various colors that are used for outbound envelopes and return envelopes. Just to clarify, are those consistent standards and requirements across all jurisdictions, or
we have no authority to require anything.
Right.
So one of the questions you need to ask about the state or county you're working in, is this a top-down state or a bottom-up state? So in Michigan, for example, because they have 1,600 jurisdictions, the State Board of Election designed their ballots and they sent that design to every jurisdiction and told them to use it. Now, one of them actually messed up and caused a lot of ballots to bounce. And that was actually what triggered the re-review of everything this year. Even in a top-down state, the printing and processing of those ballots may be being done by the counties.
In some of the states that are making late decisions, the state is doing the mailing because they can do a single contract for the whole state, and they sit on they own the voter registration database, so it's sort of easier to do. But knowing who controls what, right? Is it that the state says these are recommendations? So we tried to make our templates as flexible as possible so that it was easier to adapt to the state or the county requirements. If people ask what we really want to hang on to, it's blue goes to the voter and any other color comes back to the election office.
Gotcha. Question for both Rick and for Brooke. Is there an optimum size envelope and ballot configuration to maximize throughput in the inserter? Rick, we'll start with you.
So here's what's interesting. I mean, you heard the entire panelist group, talk about different rules for different jurisdictions. The answer is there is not one set standard that goes across the United States, and that is based off of our experience already of what we have been discussing and delivering over the years. Now, you want to get to some type of standardization, and that's why Whitney was on our panelists to try to get us there in collaboration with the United States Postal Service. But as everybody continues to point out, is that it's slightly different. It depends on the number of inserts, the design that they want to put in, the number of signatures that they want on the actual return envelopes. I mean, there's so many different things that you need to take into account. But one of the things that I can say is, there are standards that we need to abide by in order to induct into United States Postal Service. And this is not just for the inserting equipment, but making sure that it's able to process through the sorting equipment, not necessarily for what you're sorting within your facility for postal induction, but also that the United States Postal Service is able to go ahead and process that within their facilities, right, through the postal stream, right? So I just want to make sure there is not one set. It varies, but definitely we always want to make sure that it's within the boundaries of mail specifications that relates to United States Postal DMM, right?
Yep.
Right.
May I just add on that?
Yeah, please, Brooke.
And I think it's very important, as pointed out, relative to the postal specs, one wants to be sure you know what class of mail you're going in. So if you go above a 6 1/8 by 11.5, you will face what's going to appear like an X round surcharge because you fall out of being letter rate and you become a flat. So they may not tell you that, but it happens. So if you leap onto a 6.5, 9.5 that everybody's inserters could work, that may cost the county more in postage. However, the most key thing is very consistent gumming, right? You don't want gum to leak. You don't want the window patch not to be glued tight to the top. All the common things that your envelope converter really knows how to do and execute well, engage them. But that total tolerance slop varies by inserters. I think some inserters are happy with a 1/4 inch side to side. Others more prefer a 1/2 inch. So, you want to know what's happening downstream.
Hey, Brooke, I want to jump in. One of our very first meetings with the election officials in California, we had printed up a sample envelope and we'd done 6 by 9 and 6.5 by 9.5, just because those were easy ones for us to print it. And one of the election officials looked at it and said, "Oh no, that's a flat, it has to go smaller." So the election officials may know this, but I want to say one other thing is that in the states that have had 2, 3, 4, 6% vote by mail, much of this has been done manually. They haven't worried too much about the cost of mailing because the numbers were so low. That's changing, and so this is a moment when they may be open to hearing that, sure, their envelope used to be this size, but this other size will work better for automation, will work better for processing at all ends, and will just be easier for everybody to use. In Michigan, the clerk said, "Oh no, our envelopes are khaki. We have to have khaki envelopes." And we said, "Okay." We lined up a printer to do a color test to make sure the colors would print right on the khaki. And the next meeting of the committee, they came back and said, "No, we've looked at it and we've decided white is good. It looks nice and clean and modern." So this is there's a moment here when best practices can be introduced because they're having to deal with volumes that they've never had to deal with. And remember, your end is under pressure to get the ballots out into the mail stream, get the envelopes out into the mail stream. They're under a lot of pressure to get those back in, processed, and counted. So there's time pressure at both ends.
All right, a couple more questions and we'll wrap up. Brooke, this came in for you. I'm assuming that's 500 million. I'm not quite sure, but talk about, I think when you were answering the question about litho versus digital, you were encouraging litho for 500 and less, specifically the 250 range. Newer enhanced flexo webs have quality printing with up to 6 colors, are specifically designed to run 100, maybe even smaller volume, especially with these standard sizes. I'm not sure if I'm reading the question correctly, but Brooke, can you?
Yeah, I'm not going to say this is in the weeds, but my point was, in general, if you're trying to make something happen very fast for 250,000 ballots, envelopes, outer envelopes, let's say, or reply or oath, you're likely to be in a die cut process, because if it's a special window or special print, whatever it might be, it might drive it towards a die cut to start. And if it's higher volume, it'll go web. And when you think about die cutting, that's a separate process where a high die goes through a stack of paper. So litho convert is when you work with your neighboring commercial printer. He prints on a flat sheet or sheet, and then you take that and you convert it into envelopes. And that's a way to get the color wrap that Whitney explained is so important, because it's very good to have the bleed over the top. So when the envelope is vertical, one can tell what it is. If it's a standard size, as I mentioned, like a 10 or a 9, then people are already running webs at that, and the flexo printing will work. But you don't want to rule out potentially someone working with their local commercial printer, in turn creating a high value or the necessary specs desired for a vote by mail. So
Right.
it was a little bit in the weeds, but it's your envelope converter will find a good solution for you.
Great, thanks, Brooke. Listen, I'd like to thank all of our panelists today. You have their contact information up there. I'd like to add a couple of things. One, the total number of ballots estimated for vote by mail, as I think we'd indicated, some estimates are looking at 100 million ballots that would go this year through the mail. Another question was about, what can we do as an industry to kind of come together on this? And we have started a little consortium of private sector companies, of ballot printers and mailers. Please fill out the survey if you're interested in being part of this consortium to kind of create some type of unified industry response on this. Please let us know. You can email me, or better yet, please fill out the assessment here at the end of the program. Let us know of your interest. It's just coming together. We're laying the groundwork for that. It's really important that we demonstrate the power of the private sector and what a private-public partnership could really look like for our election system. So without any other comments, we'd really appreciate, again, Rick and Brooke and Whitney for being a part of this program today. And we look forward to seeing everyone else here again on another program soon.
Thank you, Thayer, and thank you for AppTech.
You betcha. Thank you so much.
Thanks all.